John List murders, the man who vanished. He killed his entire family, then vanished for 18 years. No one noticed for a month. Sit with that for a moment. Not the killing, not yet. The month, 28 days, during which 5 people lay dead inside a large Victorian house in a quiet New Jersey suburb, and the mail accumulated in the box, and the light stayed on. He had set the timer before he left, and the neighbors noticed nothing unusual, and the world moved on around a house that contained, in perfect stillness, everything he had decided to leave behind. That detail, more than any other, tells you who John List was. Part 1. The House. Westfield, New Jersey, is the kind of town that exists in the American imagination as a template for a certain kind of life. Tree-lined streets, good schools, commuter-railed New York. The houses are old and well-kept, their yards maintained with the quiet pride of people who have worked for what they have and intend to be seen to have it. Breeze Knoll stood at 431 Hillside Avenue, a 19-room Victorian mansion that John List had purchased in 1965 because it was the kind of house that said something about a man, and John List was very concerned with what things said about him. He was an accountant. He had a master's degree in business administration from the University of Michigan. He attended church every Sunday without fail, taught Sunday school, and presented to the world the precise, orderly surface of a man who had everything arranged correctly. Beneath the surface, everything was wrong. The house was financially ruinous, far beyond what List's modest accountant's salary could sustain. He had been quietly bleeding money for years, borrowing against life insurance policies, intercepting his mother's bank statements to conceal that he had been draining her savings without her knowledge, constructing an elaborate fiction of solvency that was, by the autumn of 1971, on the verge of total collapse. He was about to lose the house. He had already lost a job and concealed it from his family for months, leaving the house each morning in a suit and returning each evening, going nowhere. His wife, Helen, suffered from advanced syphilis, contracted before their marriage, which had progressively affected her mental and physical health. His mother, Alma, lived on the 3rd floor and was largely dependent on him. He had 3 children: Patricia, who was 16, John Jr., 15, and the youngest, Frederick, who was 13 years old. John List looked at his family and made a calculation. Part 2. The Plan. The document investigators later found, a letter List had left for his pastor, running to 5 handwritten pages, revealed a mind of extraordinary compartmentalization. He had planned what he was going to do for months. He had thought it through with the methodical patience of an accountant working a long ledger, and he had arrived at a conclusion that he addressed, in his own written words, in the language of religious conviction. He believed, he wrote, that his family faced a future of poverty and humiliation, that his wife and children would be led astray from God by the hardships ahead, that by killing them, he was ensuring their passage to heaven while they were still in a state of grace. He expressed concern that he himself, having committed these acts, would not be joining them there. He noted this with apparent regret. He was 56 years old. He was a Sunday school teacher. He had been planning this since the summer. On the morning of November 9th, 1971, John List began. Part 3. The Morning. He started with his wife. Helen List was in the kitchen when her husband shot her in the back of the head with a 9mm Steyr pistol. She was 45 years old. He then went upstairs to the 3rd floor, where his mother, Alma, was in her apartment. He shot her once in the face. She was 84 years old. He then went to his study, ate his lunch, and waited for the children to come home from school. This detail, the lunch, the waiting, is where the documents in the criminological record go quiet for a moment and simply hold the fact of it. He sat in his study in the house with 2 dead women and ate his lunch and waited for his children. The autumn light moved across the floors of the 19-room Victorian house. The neighborhood outside was quiet and ordinary. Frederick came home first. List shot him in the kitchen. John Jr. came home next. He shot him in the kitchen. Patricia came home in the afternoon, and he shot her as she entered. He then moved the bodies of his wife and children to the ballroom, a large empty room on the ground floor, and arranged them in sleeping bags. He left his mother on the 3rd floor. He later explained that he could not carry her down the stairs. He cleaned up the blood as best he could. He went to Patricia's evening gymnastics meet to establish an alibi. Sitting in the bleachers watching the other children perform in the place where his daughter should have been. He came home. He slept. The next morning, he left. Part 4. The disappearance. Before he left, John List attended to details. He canceled the milk delivery. He notified the school that the children would be absent due to a family illness. He wrote the letter to his pastor, 5 pages, careful, explanatory, theologically organized, and left it on his desk. He turned on every light in the house and set the timers so that the lights would continue to cycle on and off, day and night, giving the appearance of occupation. He turned on the kitchen radio, tuned to a Christian music station. Then he walked out the front door, got in his car, and drove away from Westfield, New Jersey. He wasn't seen as John List again for 18 years. The lights in Breeze Knoll cycled on and off for 28 days. The mail accumulated. Neighbors noted that the family seemed to be keeping to themselves. A teacher called the house several times. No answer. The children's friends assumed illness or a family trip. The Christian music station played softly inside the sealed house, audible if you stood close enough to the door, for nearly a month. On December 7th, 1971, a neighbor contacted police. Officers entered Breeze Knoll and found what John List had left behind. The bodies of Helen and the 3 children were still in their sleeping bags in the ballroom, exactly where he had arranged them. Alma was on the 3rd floor. A month had passed. The radio was still on. He was already gone. Part 5. The 18 years. What John List did next was both remarkable and utterly mundane. He drove to Denver, Colorado. He assumed a new identity, Robert Peter Clark, using a social security number belonging to a deceased individual. He found work as an accountant. He joined a Lutheran church. He taught Sunday school. He remarried, in 1985, a woman named Dolores Miller who knew him as Robert Clark and had no reason to believe otherwise. He lived quietly in Richmond, Virginia, in a modest house in a respectable neighborhood, attending church every week, presenting to the world the same precise, orderly surface he had always presented. For 18 years, he was simply gone. The case remained open. It was one of the most wanted fugitives cases in FBI history. A man who had killed 5 members of his family and vanished so completely that years of investigation produced nothing. His photograph aged in the files. Leads came and went. Nothing. In 1989, the television program America's Most Wanted aired a segment on John List. They consulted a forensic sculptor named Frank Bender and a criminal profiler named Richard Walter, who together produced an age-progressed bust of what List might look like 18 years later. They factored in his personality profile, his rigidity, his conservatism, his vanity, and predicted that he would have aged in specific ways, that he would likely still be living an organized, church-attending life, that he would be somewhere ordinary. The bust was so accurate that a neighbor in Richmond, Virginia, recognized it immediately. She called the tip line. Part 6. The Accounting. John List was arrested in June 1989 at his accounting office in Richmond. He was 63 years old. He did not resist. He denied, initially, that he was John List. When the FBI confirmed his identity through fingerprints, he said nothing for a long moment. Then he asked to speak to a lawyer. At his trial, he maintained that he had acted out of love, that his family was better off, that God would understand even if the court did not. He was convicted on 5 counts of murder in April 1990 and sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms. He served them in New Jersey State Prison. In 2008, John List died in prison of complications from pneumonia. He was 82 years old. He never expressed remorse that investigators, prosecutors, or surviving family members found credible. He maintained, to the end, that what he had done was a kind of provision, a final act of fatherhood, a man taking care of his family in the only way left available to him. His surviving relatives have declined, over the decades, to speak about him publicly. There is not much to say that the record does not already contain. What the record does not contain, what no trial transcript or psychological profile or criminological analysis has ever quite managed to locate, is the interior of the ballroom at Breeze Knoll in the 28 days after he left. The lights cycling on and off on their timer, the Christian music playing softly in the kitchen, the male gathering in the box outside. 5 people in sleeping bags in the dark, waiting, in a sense, to be found. And the question that John List's meticulous, handwritten, 5-page letter to his pastor never answers, the question that his theological justifications circle and circle without ever landing on, is whether a man who plans something like this for months, who eats his lunch and waits for his children to come home, who sets the light timers and cancels the milk delivery and attends the gymnastics meet, knew, in whatever part of him still functioned as a human being, exactly what he was. Sleep well, my friend.